Hello, everyone. Welcome into Southeastern 14. I am Blayne Gilmer. Thank you so much for tuning into the channel. As always, like, subscribe, turn on notifications. We greatly appreciate all that. And one thing that the Georgia Bulldogs appreciate is that man on those screens going behind me, Carson Beck, returning for his senior season in 2024. That was announced yesterday. And we're going to break down everything about that announcement, from the timing of it, from what it means going forward, to what Georgia's 2024 acquisition period is going to look like here. And I call it the acquisition period because, yes, we are in the mode of free agency with the portal. We are in the mode of, basically almost the college football's equivalent of the NFL draft when it comes to the high school recruiting cycle. That still is to Kirby Smart in Georgia. So we're going to get into all of that stuff. But first, guys, we wanted to tell you about our partnership with Bet Online. All the major sports are in action this week with college football playoffs ready to go. Bowl games are getting going. A lot of bowl stuff going each and every night here. So as fun as that used to be when I was a kid, and maybe it's lost some of its luster, but you still get to turn on college football and have that on. And you can also bet on it using Bet Online. Bet Online is your #1 destination for all your sports wagering info, news for pro football and the NBA, upcoming UFC fights, and NHL games this season. Head over to the website betonline.ag to get into the action and see all of the updated odds for the week. Remember to use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, where the game starts. Quite simply, the return of Carson Beck is the biggest offseason move that could have been made in college football, bar none, because you have a team that is the two-time defending national champions that just got knocked off by 3 points by Alabama, that is going to be looking to get back to the top of the mountain, and has maybe the toughest schedule in the entire country outside of Florida, because Florida is absolutely brutal. But right behind Florida is Georgia's next year, with trips to Tuscaloosa, to Texas, and to Ole Miss. And by the way, if you didn't see, we did a video yesterday on Ole Miss and the monster that Lane Kiffin is building over there, and the lofty expectations that Ole Miss should have with the amount of transfers that they're bringing in. And even with all of those transfers coming in for Ole Miss, even with everything going on in terms of movement around in the SEC, you got Will Howard going probably to USC, over in the Big Ten with USC going to the Big Ten, all these different moves that are going on. Carson Beck, about to be a 4,000-yard passer for Georgia with what he's going to do in the Orange Bowl. 4,000-yard passer in his first year as a starter, to forego the NFL after he has sat and waited his time in the Georgia program. He waited till his 4th year in the program to be able to start, and he just performed flawlessly. I mean, completing well over 70% of his passes. Did a great job leading Georgia to the SEC championship game. Georgia as a whole did not play as well as they wanted to, and I think that's part of the reason that Carson Beck decided to come back. But listen, I do not think one reason this is so big is because I do not think that Carson Beck comes back to Georgia without knowing some key pieces are returning with him. And I'm not just talking about on the offensive side of the ball. Like, I think, with Tate Ratledge was probably a guy he sat down and talked to see if Tate Ratledge was going to be coming back. I think Ladd McConkey is a guy that he probably had a lot of conversations with, and I wouldn't be shocked if Ladd ended up saying, hey, look at this decision by Carson. I may decide to come back and give it one more run. We'll see. Ladd's done plenty enough to be able to go to the NFL. We know Brock Bowers is gone to the NFL. He's going to be a top 5 overall pick most likely. But if you get a guy back like a Ladd McConkey, if you potentially get a guy back like a Marius Mims at right tackle, even with Tate Ratledge, over on the defensive side, maybe Javon Bullard decides to say, there's a lot of guys that are going to look at this team and they're going to say, hey, we got our guy back in Carson Beck. Because one thing that didn't really translate early on in Beck's career, or maybe even early on this season, was the personality. I didn't think he really got comfortable being the guy until 3 or 4 games in. But these guys love Carson Beck, and you have a proven leader that is going to take you on the road now to Alabama, to Austin, Texas, to Oxford, Mississippi. I think if you look at Vegas's eyes, this may be a 2-game swing for Georgia. I think that the predicted win total might have been 9.5, maybe going into the year without a guy like Carson Beck, without that experience at the quarterback position. Also, you got to remember they're losing Cedric Von Prawn to the NFL, one of the best centers of all time at the University of Georgia, and that's saying a lot, with guys like Ben Jones having been there, with guys like David Andrews having been there. So when you're talking about really, really good centers, you're losing Cedric Von Prawn. Having an experienced quarterback to help whoever the center is that's coming on, whether it's Jared Wilson or whoever, to be able to help with those protections and things like that. You don't want to have the blind leading the blind, so to speak, in terms of lack of experience at center and lack of experience at quarterback. So that's huge in terms of setting protections and all that kind of stuff. But I think Vegas will see now Georgia with a 10.5, probably a 10.5, maybe 11 game over under on the predicted win total next year, because I think they'll say, okay, Georgia's probably going to get one of those two at Alabama and Texas, and then they'll be able to take care of business in Oxford next year. I think they'll predict that in terms of Georgia being a favorite with Carson Beck back and with pieces that are going to be returning around him. Just continuity with the receivers that are returning, with the tight ends that are returning, Oscar Delp, Lawson Luckley, Pierce Sperlin, all these kind of guys now get this entire offseason to work with Carson Beck. And he gets to work with that receiving core of Dylan Bell. I think this is huge to secure guys and keep guys like Dylan Bell, Ra Thomas, Dominic Lovett, all of those guys that get another year to flourish with Carson Beck. So I think it's a huge deal and can't be overstated. Also, I think you're going to now see Georgia get through tomorrow, which is the early signing day, and the beginning of that early signing period, which guys technically have, I think, 48 hours to sign starting tomorrow in that early signing period. But people are wondering, hey, why are we not seeing this flurry of movement with Georgia getting guys, whether it's London Humphreys, who has been rumored to be out there, or Trevor Etienne that's been rumored to be coming to Georgia, or Colby Young, the wide receiver from Miami that's been rumored to be headed to Georgia. I think there's a reason you're not seeing in terms of timing, okay, them signing with Georgia or announcing, committing that they're coming to Georgia. I don't think Kirby Smart wants to do anything that could potentially be detrimental to his high school class right now. He wants to get these guys in the room, let them know, hey, this is where they stand with everything. Get that ink dry on that national letter of intent. They fax it in. Then I think you'll see some movement. I'm not saying Kirby Smart's trying to pull the wool over anybody's eyes, but just perception-wise, you don't want to give opposing teams, opposing programs, the opportunity to, you don't want to put another bullet in their holster, so to speak, to try to steal one of your guys in your recruiting class with negative recruiting right at the last minute. So I think you're going to see Kirby secure the number one recruiting class in the country, or close to it, number one or number two, with about anywhere between 28 to 29, 30 guys in it, depending on who ends up coming aboard late. And then you're going to see, then you're going to start seeing the movement in the transfer portal. Like I said, I think Georgia's going to take 2 to 3 receivers this year. I think London Humphreys from Vanderbilt is going to be one of them. They need a running back with Kendall Milton and Dejan Edwards departing. I think you're going to see Trevor Etienne come on board there and be a huge piece for Georgia, as he was in Florida. And then I think a guy like Colby Young from Miami could be a big addition for Georgia as well, a big 6'5" receiver. Last time Georgia did something like that with Lawrence Cager, it turned out pretty good for him as well. But guys, let's talk about a little bit about the timing of Carson Beck's announcement. So yesterday, news was flying everywhere. You had AJ Swan go to LSU, so big quarterback news there in the SEC front. But the two things that happened before that, Carson Beck all of a sudden, just at a random time around 4 o'clock yesterday, something like that, Eastern, all of a sudden you see, here's the Georgia football account put out a statement from Carson Beck that he's coming back. And that was about, 30, 45 minutes before Dylan Raiola announces that he's flipping from Georgia to Nebraska. Make no mistake about it. Georgia 100% knew that news was coming from Dylan Raiola, that graphic was teed up, ready to go by Hayes Fawcett, all that kind of stuff. And Georgia just had this news from Carson Beck sitting in their back pocket. And listen, Kirby's playing chess, not checkers, right? He wants to own the PR cycle. He wants to own the news cycle. And as great as Dylan Raiola is, and as great as I think he's gonna be in the college level for playing in Nebraska, all that kind of stuff, there's no question that Carson Beck returning to the Georgia Bulldogs in 2024 is the bigger news story. This is a guy who will be a favorite to win the Heisman Trophy next year. Him and Jalen Milroe will be right up there, 1 and 2 in the rankings. And Georgia goes from being a team that I think is a team that is playing for an at-large bid in the college football playoff to playing for an SEC championship next year and being maybe the favorite to win the national title. Them and Alabama again next year going into the season. That's how big of a difference this makes. So that was a masterful work of PR there by Georgia, and working not only the news cycle and the roster management all at the same time, but just letting people know, hey, this Georgia team is locked in. They get a lot to play for in this Orange Bowl in terms of now going forward with continuity and looking good and getting things going forward. Carson Beck, like I said, can become only the second 4,000-yard passer in Georgia history behind Stetson Bennett, who did it last year. So it's going to be interesting to see how they play in the Orange Bowl. It's going to be interesting to see, let Kirby and the staff get past this early signing day period, early signing period with the high school guys, and then you're going to see the transfer decisions start trickle in Georgia's favor. So, and I think you're going to see some key returns in the next couple of days as well, as this is humongous news for Georgia with Carson Beck coming back. Like I said, he's now put himself in a position to possibly win the Heisman Trophy. I think he's put himself in the position to be the number 1 draft pick overall in 2025. He's going to have that kind of a season, and he's going to have more game tape for people to watch and say, well, is this more of just him flourishing inside of a good Georgia system? But now he's going to have even more tough games. And he had tough games this year against Missouri, but that was at home. He had a Tennessee game on the road. He had an Ole Miss game at home. He had a Kentucky game at home. A lot of his bigger games were at home. And then the Alabama game didn't go necessarily the way he wanted to. Well, he's going to have opportunities to dispel any kind of negative thoughts about him going into the NFL draft next year with games at Alabama, with games at Texas, with games at Ole Miss. So, I mean, I think it's just going to be a win-win for both teams. He said in his statement, hey, the NFL can wait a year. And I think he's been a poster child for waiting, for patience, something that is not common in college football today. Carson Beck has shown patience in his career, and I think it has paid off for him brilliantly, something that a lot of these young men, I think, could learn from. Carson Beck could put out a master class on, hey, if you just wait, if all good things come to those who wait. And I think he took his time. He's waited. I know that he's a man of faith. To see him posting scripture. Well, he's certainly a guy who has abided and has grown where his feet are planted. So I think Carson Beck is maybe the biggest. Him returning is maybe the biggest news in the entirety of college football in 2024. Also worth mentioning on the quarterback front, behind him now they will have Gunnar Stockton. They will have Ryan Puglisi, who's signing with Georgia, and then they'll have Coulter Ginn. And here's the thing about what Kirby does. Kirby always wants to have 4 scholarship quarterbacks. Well, he's only going to have 3 going into next year as it stands right now, because Coulter Ginn is going to be preferred walk-on. But Coulter Ginn, guys, is a guy who had offers from the likes of UAB, and Trent Dilfer knows quarterback play, Western Kentucky, Middle Tennessee. All these group of 5 schools wanted Coulter Ginn, and he's an in-state guy that has a big arm, from Perry High School in Georgia, won the state championship this year at a high level of high school football in the state of Georgia. So that is a big deal for Georgia to be able to add another quarterback to the room, not have to use a scholarship on him. I'm sure there's some NIL opportunities that are going to be afforded that young man at Georgia that he probably wouldn't have gotten at other places, even with a scholarship in hand at those other places. So Kirby Smart and Georgia have fortified the depth of that quarterback room, but Kirby Smart has his guy in Carson Beck in 2024, and I think that's absolutely huge news, with more good news coming for Georgia right now, guys. Teams that are winning the offseason, Georgia would be one of those, because yes, there's people leaving, but understand the people that are leaving, maybe 2 of those guys were impact players last year. The rest of them probably were not going to play even this next coming year at Georgia that we're leaving. And anytime you're bringing in 30 guys in a signing class, plus you want to bring in 5 or 6 in the transfer portal, you had to, just to make numbers work, you had to make probably 15, to 20, maybe even 25 had to leave the program just to get under the 85 on the scholarship. So it's a numbers game, and Georgia plays the numbers game as well as anybody. So expect more good news coming for Georgia after this Carson Beck return. And guys, we appreciate you tuning in here to Southeastern 14. Stay tuned, as we'll be breaking down all of these teams, and we'll be getting into bowl games, predictions, all that kind of good stuff here over the next week or so. So also a little rebrand coming. We're not going to be Southeastern 14 much longer, as there's now more than 14 teams in the SEC. So guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Like, subscribe, turn on notifications, and we will catch you guys next time right here on Southeastern 14, presented by Bet Online.